All right. So Cam, let's talk about who you are, what your background is, and why you got into guiding breathing exercises and the Wim Hof method.
Yeah, that's a fun one to say.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, good to see you, Kristen. It's thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'll jump right into it. My background is I'm a data analyst. Let's say I'm a cheap man's version of a data scientist. And so you combine this kind of my passion for data and analyzing data with I've been an athlete pretty much all my life since the age of 6, and I've done a bunch of stuff, and we can get into that a little bit later. But when you combine my passion for data and analytic type work with athletics, and then I went back to school a few years back, 4 years ago, and got a second master's. And out of that program, I began working with a near clinical grade wearable company. So think of like Fitbit, but on the more accurate side. And the CEO of that company wanted me to investigate this Wim Hof method thing that was just coming out of the woodwork. It's been around for a while, but the scientific studies were just starting to hit the mainstream. And he wanted me to look into those studies and see if there's anything that we can participate in and leverage. So I began kind of reading some of the scientific studies that were published on Wim Hof with regards to his ice baths and his breathing and being able to thwart off like poison being injected into him and doing all this crazy stuff that he was doing, which were, other people have done crazy physical stuff, but for Wim, everything was backed by science. So there was this kind of an interesting intersection between these, the superhuman activities that he was doing, but also now the science has gotten behind to be able to prove what's going on. So long story short, I began reading studies, and then I was like interested in it personally as well. So I began taking some online workshops, then some in-person workshops, and this is way before the pandemic. And one thing led to another, and I'd done enough work with the Wim Hof method that they said, hey, why don't you just become an instructor? And that was 4 years ago. So I became an instructor while, continue with my daytime job as a data analyst, and began sharing it with our friends in jujitsu. And one thing led to another, and smaller groups at my house became bigger groups. Then I was approached by gyms and just kind of began networking and teaching the Wim Hof method. And as some folks may know, the Wim Hof method has 3 pillars, which are start out with breathing techniques, and then a voluntary exposure to environmental elements. We use cold in the Wim Hof method. And then there is a mindset and focus component, which makes up the 3rd pillar of this program. And I really enjoyed the breath component of it a lot more. I found it to be accessible. You don't really need an ice bath or a sauna. You don't really need anything else. All you need to do is just sit back, be comfortable, or lay down and be comfortable and breathe. You don't need any subscription. You don't need any gimmicks. You don't need anything else. And again, my kind of analytical DNA, I began reading books and grabbing on any information that I possibly can. And over the past 2 to 2.5 years, um, my repertoire and my knowledge of utilizing breathing practices to help everything resetting the body, grounding it, to dealing with stress and anxiety, to helping to improve athletic performance, and everything in between, helping learning and memory, cognition, neuroplasticity. Uh, it's just incredible to me how the one thing that we do about 20,000 or 26,000 times in a 24-hour basis, the number of breaths that we take, has such a profound impact on our physiology, and how in the adult life we tend to forget how to breathe properly. So if we can bring that cognition back to utilizing breath, um, it really has profound effects. So that's how I kind of fell into both the Wim Hof method, which was for me a gateway drug into learning more about breath and utilizing breath. And so that's what I do. I'm a data analyst. I'm a breath guide and a Wim Hof method certified Wim Hof method instructor. And I've been an athlete all my life, dating back to collegiate tennis. Then I raced triathlons for a long time, semi-pro. Then I was elite level cyclist, and last 7-8 years of jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu has taken my heart. So I'm always looking for ways to improve my performance and also recovery. And that's where we are.
That's awesome. Such a cool story. I knew a good chunk of that, but some of that was new for me. So that was cool. Um, so let's jump in and talk about, the top 5 benefits of breathing exercise and how they relate to optimizing your health, whether it's, to lose weight, to manage stress and anxiety, to help improve cognitive abilities, things, like learning and memory, or any combination thereof. What makes breath work special and relevant for us?
So that's a great question, and I'll make it specific to the topic that we're talking about with regards to the program that you're putting together and your clients and how they can benefit from it. So let's just jump in and talk about weight loss. Some of the things that can happen with regards to breathing and learning how to breathe properly is that close to 80% of fat loss is actually done in our lungs and our exhales. It's a shocking number. That means that out of, let's say, 10 pounds that someone might lose, 8 of those 10 pounds are exhaled out in the form of extra carbon molecules that are attached to oxygen that we breathe in. So I'll get into that in just a second. But that number, when I first read it, really blew my mind and I questioned it. So I dove into it, and it's in fact true. On average, 80% of the fat that we lose gets transformed into carbon molecules, and we actually exhale it out. The rest of the 20% comes out in our sweat, in our urine, and what we excrete out through our bowels. But that's a huge number to think about. And if you kind of break it down, I don't want to bore people with too much chemistry. They can look it up themselves. We breathe in mostly oxygen. Our body utilizes oxygen, which we all know is O2. So there's 2 molecules of oxygen. And what we breathe out predominantly is CO2. So it still has those 2 molecules of oxygen, but now a carbon molecule has gotten attached to it. So that carbon molecule is what is being transformed through our biogenesis in the form of work, utilizing glycogen stores and different types of energy stores, and turning that into ATP, and that's used for doing work, and then eventually it's turned into a carbon molecule and it's excreted out through our exhales. Now, molecules, if we think about each breath that we take in, we're taking in somewhere around 25 sextillion molecules of air. Just a perspective, that's the number 25 with 21 zeros or in front of it, no, behind it. So again, to give that perspective, if we assume that there are 7 billion people on this planet, and that each one of the 7 billion people have 7 billion ancestors, that's still in the magnitude of 500 times less than the number 25 sextillion. So think about, and that's each breath that we take in. Each time that we take an inhale, 25 sextillion molecules go in. They do their work through the gas exchange. They get our lungs and our bloodstream transport those oxygen molecules to the working muscles. And then as we exhale, a certain portion of that is released, attached with a carbon molecule. And that's done with every inhale and every exhale. Now, if a person breathes in about 15 times a minute, which is about average, that rounds out to somewhere about 20,000 breaths in a 24-hour basis. So 1,000 times each day times 25 sextillion molecules of air going in and doing their thing and leaving, which really nets out to that if we learn how to breathe properly, we can expedite and we can optimize how much weight and how much the fat loss happens during that exhale process. So breathing techniques, if we learn how to properly, really sets the body up physiologically so that the weight loss can happen more efficiently. It won't happen overnight, but that's something that usually within about a 3-day cycle, that optimization begins to happen a lot faster. So, for me, weight loss and fat loss is really one of the main benefits of learning how to breathe properly, but that's not all. we're talking about regrounding and optimizing our entire body, entire biosystem, so that it can work state of homeostasis, which you know very well. This is kind of like this magical unicorn state where all the molecules and all the systems within bodies are working optimally. I think it's one of my favorite quotes is never balanced, always balancing, which means that we're always in the act of finding balance in our lives. And I think homeostasis is like that within our body. If we're dehydrated, if we don't proper nutrition, oxygen, daylight, sleep, all those factors in to creating this state of homeostasis. Breath work, learning how to breathe properly and intentfully, really helps to set the foundation upon which these other things that we do to help our health are going to have a much more profound and more effective stance. So homeostasis, fat loss, which we talked about, learning also breathing properly helps to calm our body. We have a lot of stress and anxiety, especially over the last year and a half in our world. And if we think about what happens with regards to how stress is introduced to our body, not all stress is bad. Some stress helps us grow and achieve. But if stress is not properly managed, that can turn into anxiety. Anxiety can turn into worry. And if you continue down that pipeline, if it gets built up and it's not processed properly, it can eventually lead to panic attacks. And that's where I think a lot of folks have issues with it, is how to manage stress and anxiety at the beginning so it doesn't turn into something that is out of their control and the body reacts in ways that we don't like it down towards the end part. So when we breathe into our chest, that's actually a sympathetic stimulator. And sympathetic stimulator is the fight or flight that we have. So if someone's having anxiety and stress, if we find ourselves that we're breathing into our chest, like we do sometimes at work, if we're in meetings, we just kind of forget how to use our belly and our diaphragm. If we breathe into our chest, that anxiety is going to get further fueled with more anxiety and becomes a slippery slope down a really bad rabbit hole. So and then the opposite of that is if we breathe from our diaphragm, which is right below our chest, that's actually a parasympathetic stimulator. And our parasympathetic nervous system is our rest and relaxation. The one analogy I like to use from a visual perspective, if you think about like the caveman, cavewoman days back in the days of yore, anything that happened inside of the cave is parasympathetic. It's rest and relaxation. The visual, they've got a nice fire going. Maybe they just went hunting. They've got some food. They've got some ale. Someone's playing some music and they're relaxing. Anything that happened outside of the cave is sympathetic stimulator. They're hunting. They're always on cue. Are they being hunted by some large animal or other groups and other tribes? So inside the cave, rest and relaxation. Outside the cave, fight or flight. Same thing with breath. Chest breathing, fight or flight, diaphragm breathing, rest and relaxation. So again, learning how to breathe is properly, it can help to manage stress and anxiety. So those are, and then the last thing I'll say, and this is something that I've been diving into to find more science behind it. I haven't quite found what I'm looking for yet, but there is this school of thought that says that learning how to breathe properly can help stave off food cravings. I have to think that probably a large part of that is because sometimes we eat unconsciously because maybe we're bored or we're watching TV and we're just not aware of this act of putting something in our mouth. And as you know much better than me, one of the things, why diet and nutrition, especially nutrition, is important is because it's a voluntary act of putting something in our mouths. But if we're watching TV or we're not aware of it, 5 almonds can now become a bag of almonds and those calories will count. Breathing properly can help to bring awareness and mindfulness so that you're more mindful about your actions. So not just eating and nutrition, what goes in the mouth, but also how you treat yourself and others around you. So, and I know that for a fact, just a subjective testimonial that I've been utilizing breath work for a number of years now, and it's made me much more aware of my actions and in areas that I used to be kind of on automatic pilot. now I'm more mindful and more intentful with my actions, and that shows up in different parts of my life with regards to how I treat others and not myself. In traffic, that's kind of my where an area that I get triggered a lot. But also with regards to like eating dinner, if busy day and I'm starving and I get a bowl of food with me, I usually just kind of power through it. Now I'm able to just kind of take a breath and be intentful with putting each forkful or spoonful of food in my mouth, putting the fork down, chewing it properly, and then taking another one. That act alone, that awareness, I think can have a profound effect, trickles down into people's lives. So that's, I think, 4 or 5 of the top things that I like about breathing techniques and breathing exercises, and as they relate to the program that you're developing.
That's some awesome information. So Kam, what are some breathing techniques that people can utilize to achieve these different benefits you were talking about?
Great question. So lots and lots, literally thousands of different types of techniques. If anybody's ever kind of swam or been a swimmer, you know that the swimming coach comes up with like a list of things that you're going to do in a swimming workout, and you can get as creative as you want. At the core of all breathing techniques is the awareness or the intent of each breath that you take in. But and that's really what it comes down to it. But however, how we breathe and the intensity that we breathe and the depth of each breath can have different effects. I usually divide these effects into, let's say, the gas pedal, so more energizing type of breathing techniques, or the brake pedal, which calms the body down. Both of these techniques kind of work on this philosophy, Kristen, that the more oxygen we take in, the more energized we're going to feel. The less oxygen we take in, or said another way, the more we allow CO2 to build up, the more of a calming net effect it will have on our physiology. So I usually divide the breathing techniques into what are people looking to do? Are they looking to energize and optimize? Then the techniques will take in more oxygen. Or are they looking to calm the body down, let's say before going to bed, or if we've had a stressful day and we just want to calm down before we engage with our friends and family and children. Maybe we've got a lot of anxiety. We need to calm our central nervous system down. So we want to breathe in less oxygen and let CO2 accumulate. So with those two, some of my favorite techniques is, obviously I'm a big fan of the Wim Hof method, which is also called Tummo, T-U-M-M-O. It is a technique that has been utilized by Tibetan monks for thousands and thousands of years, and people want to look that up. There is actually videos of Tibetan monks soaking themselves in cold water and sitting in snow and being able to not only dry themselves, but to melt the snow around them using nothing but this technique. It is a very powerful technique, and it's, I won't get into the details of it, but the Tummo breathing, you're definitely taking in a lot more oxygen and you're lowering the CO2, and there is a toggling effect of playing with those dials. So take in oxygen and then hold your breath, let the CO2 rise. Rising CO2 triggers the body to release more red blood cells and also be able to extract more oxygen molecules that we talked about earlier and be able to utilize that. So CO2 and O2 work together. And so the Tummo style really helps to energize and optimize the body. And that's one of my favorite ones. Another one that I really like, another method, is what I call the rock and roll method. And it's kind of, you can do it to the, like the Queen song, We Will Rock You. And that one, kind of the rhythm for me always, I love doing this in groups. I just sit there and I go, boom, boom, chi, boom, boom, chi. So I get that rhythm going, and sometimes maybe I'll play that song. And the reason I do that is because it's a 2-part inhale, 1-part exhale. And that also gets you to take in a lot more oxygen with compared to the CO2 that you release, helps to energize the body. So Tummo and rock and roll breath, great ways to pick things up, whether it's in the morning, you're just kind of groggy, or let's say before a meeting, or if you're actually going into learning, if you're learning something that's complicated, doing this type of breath work will help you retain the information downstream in a long-term basis. So that's on the upside. On the downside, if you want to bring the body and the central nervous system down, I really like the Brahmari breath. Brahmari, again, is an old kind of a yogic type of breathing where you count the number of cycles for the inhale, and then you try to double that on the number of cycles on the exhale. I call them cycles and not seconds because if you don't have a watch, I mean, you can use a watch. Let's say you do a 3-second inhale, and then you want to do a 6-second exhale. So it's whatever count you have on the inhale, you double it on the exhale. I like 4-8. I think that one is challenging enough with regards to the inhale, and the exhales are, I think, are doable for most people. The trick with the Brahmari is to make sure that on the inhale, you're not just doing one big inhale and then holding for the rest of the count. Is you want to make sure that the inhale is as nice, as smooth, and prolonged for the, let's just say, 4 count. And then the exhales, you can actually hum. Humming is fantastic. It helps to release a bunch of nitric oxide from our noses. Science has proven that to be about 15-fold. And nitric oxide is a vasodilator, so it helps with that CO2 buildup and the rest of our chemistry and piping to be able to extract more oxygen and utilize it. So I'll do something like, so something like that helps to calm the body down. Another one that I like is a version of the Brahmari, which is you can do what's called a 4-7-8 breath, and that's a 4-count inhale, 7-count hold, 8-count exhale, and you do that for about 3 to 4 minutes. And then the last one I'll say is I'm a huge fan of doing isolated nostril breathing. So our nostrils are designed, our nose is designed for the act of breathing. So we want to try to minimize or even entirely avoid breathing through the mouth. In athletics, if you're training, certainly at nighttime before going to sleep, I think mouth breathing has caused a lot of issues with regards to our facial structure, our teeth. The cascading effect of not using our nose is really profound. But the thing that I like to do is to utilize an isolated nostril. So I'll just use my index finger and I'll just plug up one nostril for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then I'll switch it on the other side. If someone is plugged up, they do the best that they can. If I'm plugged up on this nostril, I'll actually, instead of like forcing myself to breathe into the plugged nostril, I'll plug the already plugged nostril and breathe a bunch of times through the opposite side. And that usually opens things up, which is, again, counterintuitive. But isolated nostril is a great one. Brahmari, which we talked about, is a great one. And then Tumo, which is the Wim Hof style method, is great for energizing. And then the rock and roll one is also a favorite of mine.
Awesome. Yeah, that was going to be my question, is do you have any favorites? But so what can people expect in the breathing component of our platinum program here at TrueU?
Awesome. So this is going to be really fun, and I think what people can expect is there's going to be certainly a number of guided breathing exercises. We're gonna do a number of live ones. Kristen over at the Jiu-Jitsu studio that we work at, and we're going to expand from that. So we'll have a number of live sessions that people can participate, and as well as a number of recorded sessions that they can utilize anytime, anywhere that they want to. And those will be guided by myself and perhaps a couple of other breath work teachers. And those are intended to help, just kind of make sure that when people need to plug in and they need a little bit more motivation, like I said before, breath work, the beauty of it is that you can do it literally almost anywhere, anytime. The caveat is that you don't want to do it in areas that if you happen to fall asleep, that something bad might happen. So never behind a car, never on, like, let's say, a bicycle or on a surfboard. Any body of water you should never do breath work in. So there are certain circumstances where we don't want to do breath work, but this is, like I said, this is something that you can do practically anytime, anywhere, and you can just do it. All you have to do is close your eyes and do it. but sometimes we need a little bit of guidance. So those recorded sessions with you are going to be something that people can plug into. And that's going to be at their advantage. We'll also do little snippets where I'll go through and explain, for example, what is the 2-mo style breathing, what is a Brahmari style breathing, what is a 4-7-8 breathing, and those will be followed with a brief explanation and then some guidance so people can utilize that. And our net goal is to help people learn several techniques, several breathing techniques that they can keep in their back pocket and pull out depending on what they need and be able to utilize that. So we want to help people become their own breath coaches by showcasing a number of different breathing protocols that really can help people kind of become more mindful, change their physiology, get more grounded, deal with stress and anxiety, calm the body down if they've had a stressful day, help with learning and all the different benefits that can come from it.
Awesome. Awesome. So my last question for you today, Kam, is where can people learn more? Where can we find some resources? You know, what can you point us to?
Yeah, so great question. And fortunately, we live in a day and an age where the world is not short of resources. So there are lots of different guided breath meditations on YouTube. So I've got my favorites on there too. I'm happy to share that playlist with people. The folks at the Wim Hof method, the organizing body of the Wim Hof method is called Inner Fire. But the Wim Hof folks have a app that I think is fantastic. That's free to download, and I think this got some. They've updated it recently, but there are some free components where there is some guided breath that is for free to use, and then they've got paid ones if people want to get more advanced with it. Also a great resource. And then I also have to point out that there are two books really that I found really incredible, and I've handed out more copies of these books probably in the 20s to people that I think can use it. The first one is a book called Breath. It's written by James Nestor, and that is my favorite one. I think I lend you my copy, so there'll be a test
on
later,
my nightstand.
Okay. So I'm a huge fan of that book. It's called Breath by James Nestor. It's an easy read and really gets into kind of what's happening with breath and how we've forgotten. And then the second one that is a little bit more technical is a book by a gentleman by the name of Patrick McGowan. The name of the book is The Oxygen Advantage. And that's more technical, and it's really focused on one breathing technique called the Buteyko method. Buteyko, who was a Russian scientist that developed a breathing technique predominantly for people who were suffering with asthma and was able to help cure them on a lot of ways. But it's really intense, Patrick goes through kind of the chemistry and the science behind breathing techniques and the benefits of learning how to breathe properly. So YouTube, Wim Hof Method app, the book Breath by James Nestor, and The Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McGowan are really great places to start.
Awesome. I like I said, I have your book on my nightstand, so I'm excited to be diving in. So thank you so much for all of your time today. Is there anything else that you wanted to say before we close?
Not really, other than I'm really looking forward to working with you, and you know, my personal mission has always been to help improve people's lives as directly as I possibly can. So I'm available if anybody has any questions, or they need a little bit kind of more private or extra guidance on the side. I'm happy to help. Like I said, and I've told you before, this isn't my full-time job. This is what I do from the place of heart, and to be able to kind of pay back and pay it forward to people. So it's a place of service for me, and I really enjoy it. For folks who are in San Diego, especially in North County, you know, we do a guided community breath practice on Sundays at Gracie Baja Encinitas, which is the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu studio that we go to, and it's off of Encinitas Boulevard and Westlake. We start at noon, and we go somewhere between an hour to an hour and a half maximum, and it's open to everybody and anybody. Had you know, children in the class and lots of, you know, athletes and non-athletes. It's really a mishmash of people, but something happens when we all get in a community. I mean, it's one thing to do breathing about yourself, but when we get into a community, not just a physical community, but also an online community, we feed off of each other's energies, and there is a heart resonance, kind of a magic that happens. So I'm available at your service. Don't be shy to reach out. My website, you can Google me. Kristen will put the name up and contact information. And other than that, look forward to working with you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.